All right, today we're putting on our detective hats. We're going to investigate a dangerous, really elusive bacterium. This is a story about a hidden threat that can turn the things we use every day into the source of a deadly disease. So let's start digging. So our case opens with a real puzzle. A patient shows up with a really bad respiratory illness. You look at the chest x-ray and you think, okay, classic pneumonia, but something's off. This illness isn't responding to the usual treatments, and the patient can get worse fast. Doctors are basically fighting an invisible enemy. And the stakes? They are incredibly high. For every 10 people who get this severe type of pneumonia, which we call Legionnaire's disease, one of them won't make it. This isn't just a tricky diagnosis. We're talking about a life or death situation. So our first job as detectives is to really get a handle on this thing. Why is it so tough to nail down? And what exactly makes it so dangerous? Now here's where it gets really weird. Our microscopic culprit can cause two completely different problems. On one hand, you've got Legionnaire's disease. This is the severe, potentially deadly pneumonia. But on the other hand, you can get something called Pontiac fever, which is more like a mild flu that just kind of goes away on its own. It's the exact same bacteria, but it creates two totally different crime scenes inside the human body. So let's go ahead and unmask this perpetrator. It's time to build a proper criminal profile for the bacterium at the center of our mystery, Legionella pneumophila. Okay, so what is Legionella? Formally, it's a type of gram-negative bacteria. But the most important thing to know is that it is notoriously hard to grow in a lab. And that right there is a huge problem for doctors. I mean, if you can't grow the bacteria from a sample, how can you be sure that's what's making your patient sick? It's an organism that demands very specific conditions just to show up. And its profile gets even more particular. It has to have oxygen. It loves warm, body-like temperatures, around 35 to 37 degrees Celsius. It's a super picky eater, needing special nutrients like L-cysteine and iron that you just don't find in standard lab cultures. Oh, and it's tough too. It can survive in acidic conditions, and it resists the usual staining methods scientists use to see bacteria under a microscope. It's a master of staying hidden. But all of those traits, they're nothing compared to its ultimate survival trick, its secret weapon. This bacterium doesn't just survive in water, it hides. And this shows you exactly how it does it. It's kind of brilliant in a terrifying way. Legionella actually invades other single-celled organisms like amoebas that are floating around in water systems. It basically uses the amoeba as a bodyguard and a mobile home, shielding it from disinfectants like chlorine and letting it multiply in secret. Okay, so we know our culprit and we know its secret weapon. The next question for any detective is obvious. Where does it hide? What are the environmental crime scenes we need to be checking out? And the answer is, well, it's pretty much all around us. As this infographic from the CDC shows, Legionella absolutely loves the big, complex water systems that we've built, especially when they're not well maintained. We're talking about hotels, hospitals, big office buildings, even cruise ships. And the data here is it's undeniable. Take a look at this breakdown of where outbreaks come from. A massive 83%, the overwhelming majority, are traced right back to the water systems inside buildings. And that's the key thing to realize. These are places we are around every single day. The cooling towers for our air conditioning, the shower you took this morning, the hot tub at a resort, even those nice decorative fountains, and some medical equipment. Any of them can become a breeding ground. So we know the culprit, and we know its hideouts, but how does it make the jump from a water pipe all the way into a person's lungs? What's its MO? How does the attack actually happen? It really happens in 4 pretty clear steps. First, the bacteria grow in the water system, usually inside a slimy, protective layer called a biofilm. Second, something like a shower head or a cooling tower turns that contaminated water into a fine mist, an aerosol. Third, someone who's susceptible just happens to breathe in that mist. And finally, the bacteria set up shop in the lungs and start to multiply, which is what causes the infection. And this brings us to the climax of our investigation. How do doctors and public health officials finally connect all the dots? How do they diagnose the illness and then track an outbreak all the way back to a single source? So back in the hospital, doctors are looking for a very specific pattern of clues that suggests it's not just regular pneumonia. These include a really high fever, weirdly low sodium levels in the blood, sometimes neurological symptoms like confusion, and high levels of an enzyme called LDH. When all 4 of those are present, the alarm bells for Legionnaires start ringing really loud. And for a perfect real-world example, let's head to the Bronx back in 2015. A deadly outbreak was happening, and investigators started by literally putting pins on a map showing where sick people lived and worked. This gave them a geographic cluster, a search zone, to start hunting for the source. Now, this is the forensic tech they used. This is the smoking gun. Investigators took samples from the patients and then compared them to samples from possible sources, like cooling towers on top of buildings in that area. They used a technique called DNA fingerprinting to see if the genetic codes were a match. And this tweet from the NYC Department of Health says it all. Bingo. They found a perfect match. The specific DNA fingerprint of the Legionella bug that was making people sick was identical to the strain they found in one particular cooling tower. They found the source. Case closed. So, once the mystery is solved, the focus completely shifts. How do you treat the people who are sick? And maybe even more importantly, how do you stop this from ever happening again? Well, it's a two-part approach. For treatment, you can't just use any old antibiotic. Because Legionella hides inside our own lung cells, patients need special antibiotics that can actually get inside those cells to kill the bacteria where they're hiding. But really, the best solution is prevention. That all comes down to managing water systems correctly. And one of the most critical steps is temperature control, keeping cold water really cold and hot water really hot to stop the bacteria from growing in the first place. And this all brings us to one final thought. The very systems that give us modern comforts, a hot shower, a cool office, can be hiding a serious danger if we don't stay on top of them. And it really poses a crucial question for all of us. Are we paying enough attention to the invisible infrastructure that we rely on every single day?